how I received the Commodore Award is when I was chairman of the Board of Trade next door. I have an office next door too.
Mm.
We could go there, but this is more private. This office. I'm on a Ukrainian bank board. I've been on the board for since 1994. My my girl, we're having a board meeting right now in San Juan, Puerto Rico, but I didn't go because I had some doctor's appointments I had to attend to. So I was appointed to this board by President Clinton back in 1993. So you see all these maps of Ukraine,
Oh,
Moldova, and Belarus.
yeah,
So,
well,
so
keep that in the White Sox stuff.
well, my partner Jeff Neal, he's a White Sox fan.
Oh.
I went to the Cubs game. I was in the Cubs game Sunday night, and of course, they won 13-5. And I texted him. He's in Florida. He didn't go to the meeting either. He's in Florida, and I said, Wrigley Field is packed, and the Cubs just surged in the first place. He says, wait till September.
Yeah.
He's a White Sox fan. I'm a Cubs fan.
Yeah, I
But
went to Sox game where they lost 15-2.
Yeah, but I have an office, Shatkin Arbor, right next door.
Mm-hmm.
We can go there. If you want to go there, we can go there
No,
too.
yes.
Because this, you want it private. There's some traders and people like that.
So, before we begin, do you have like a resume or something
Sure.
that we can put in the file
Sure.
just to get the facts, the outline
Sure.
of the facts?
Sure.
Okay, so can you tell me your family history, your life story as an Italian American?
Well, I can. First of all, with my last name Arbor, which was changed from Arbory, nobody ever believed I was Italian because I don't look Italian, but I'm half Italian and half Irish. And I believe if you're half Italian, you're all Italian. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because every Sunday, when I was a kid, we had to go to my grandmother's house for dinner.
And you grew up in Chicago?
Yes, the west side of Chicago, indeed, yes.
Taylor Street, or?
No, at home. Well, we lived at Holman in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
Italian neighborhood, 633 North Holman. Everybody spoke Italian there, and I lived a little farther west, and we go visit my grandmother every Sunday with my family then. And
So part of your family was from Gravina. Were there a lot of people from Gravina in that area?
not a lot, but there were some because my grandmother and her new husband, who was my step grandfather, they knew some people. Not a lot though.
Mm-hmm.
There was a man named Norfio. He was a friend of theirs, and I remember him. But there were Italians from Italy, so
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother would take me shopping on Chicago Avenue. She spoke Italian, and all the butchers were Italian, and the grocery store. We would walk. I would walk with her to carry
This
her
would have been in the 40s, 50s?
in the 40s and 50s, exactly. There were two theaters there, the Alamo and the Famous, and there was no air conditioning. And we'd go there, and the Italian men would sit there with their undershirts and have about a quart of beer, and they'd be drinking. We'd watch cowboy movies when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what year did your grandmother or grandfather come from Puglia?
Well, I checked that on the ellisisland.com, and they came around, I think, around 1905, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere. My Uncle Frank came first. He was a barber, and
Oh.
he's a barber, I think, at the Palmer House where I was yesterday. And then he was a good barber. He had wore a smock and everything, and then he brought the rest of the family over.
So he brought his father and his
Well,
mother?
his father was dead. He brought his mother, his mother, my great grandmother. She was still alive when they came over, and brought over my grandmother Julia, her sister my Aunt Lena, and then two brothers, my Uncle Phil and my Uncle Sam, and Uncle Frank. There were five of them. Uncle Frank came first, and then my grandma Julie, Aunt Lena.
And your
So-
grandmother got married here?
My grandmother was married here.
She married.
My original grandfather name was Savino Arbore with an E on the end,
Okay.
and she married him.
And what do you remember his occupation or
They said he was a carpenter.
a
That's all I know.
carpenter? And he is the one who was killed by a gunshot? Or?
Yes, you retrieved an article on the Tribune. He was on April 9th of 1917, 4 months before my father was born. He went to a party, a wine party apparently, according to the newspaper article, and was inside the party having some wine, and some people came to the front door and said, Savino, your wife wants you. He and a friend of his ran out the back door, apparently, and they had guns, and a gunfight ensued in the backyard, and he was shot and killed.
Hmm. Well, what do you make of it? Was he a criminal or?
Well, I don't know. When I was a kid, I would ask about it all the time, and they said he was a good man, he would have loved you very much, but he got in with the wrong people. That was one story.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother by that time had my Aunt Esther, who was the oldest of the children, and then my father, she was pregnant with my father when this happened. He was born in September of 1917, 4 months later, and then she subsequently remarried the first immigrant they could find from Bari. He was from Modugno, named Raphael D'Ambrosio, and for some reason, he removed my Aunt Esther and my father from the house because he had my Aunt Rosie, who was wonderful, and she had a different story. She said, no, he was in a card game and was caught cheating, and the other story she had is that, no, he was betrothed to a woman, betrothed to a woman over in Corato, Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a child by her, and he fled and disgraced the family, and that family hired the Black Hand to come over and eliminate him. I don't know which of the three stories is true. I think the story is that he got in with the wrong people, because at that time there was a lot of mafia stuff going on in Chicago. However, I did receive a wonderful history when I was made an honorary citizen of Gravina by the mayor of Corato, who came to my ceremony, and I could see that my Savino indeed had married in Corato, and more than that, he had to marry because a child was born shortly after he married. So there may have been something to that. And then I have now discovered second cousins in Italy whose their mother, their grandmother, and my grandfather were brothers and sisters. And they said that the story they heard is the family, he came with his brother, I think his name was Cataldo, and they went to Rochester, New York, because there's a lot of metalworking there. But Savino came to Chicago for the big time and probably got with the wrong people. So I think the first story is probably true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they were this is the 1920s, they're the west side of Chicago. Your grandmother married D'Ambrosio. What occupation did he have?
He worked as a light man in a bag handler at the train station. Just a very menial job, but he worked every day. He was a hard worker, and what's interesting is when I went back eventually, years later after he died, I met one of his relatives in Modugno. I went to see him because I had the
Mm-hmm.
address, and he said that he wrote letters back saying he was very rich in America, but he wasn't rich at all.
I think that a lot of folks did that. They take pictures of themselves all dressed up and send it back to Italy and made it look like that was their normal daily life.
And then somewhere around there, they changed the name from Arbore to Arbor and moved. The first original Italian neighborhood, I believe, was around 22nd in Oakley in the South Side.
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they moved out to Montrose somewhere until things quieted down, and then they moved to Holman Avenue in Chicago, 633 North Holman.
Now that's where you were born,
Yeah, I was born in Garfield Park Hospital. Yeah.
and that would have been approximately what year were you born?
Exactly, October 11th, 1936.
1936. So, Do you remember anything about being Italian during World War II?
Yes, because I remember my cousins, Eddie and Tony D'Ambrosio, they went to war. They were GIs, and Eddie went over to he was at, I think, the second or third wave in Normandy. Tony didn't have any battle experience, but my aunt Rosie, my aunt, was very smart, and she wanted to be a coder, a decoder, because she was very good at encryption. She was very smart, like my father was smart too. So she applied for that, but because of her Italian heritage, because her parents were born in Italy, they considered her a security risk, and they put her up in Cleveland instead of Atlanta, Georgia, where the encryption was going on, where she sorted boxes and things like that. So I remember that very distinctly. I remember the boys coming home too.
Do you remember, was anyone in your family who had not applied for citizenship had to register as an enemy alien?
No.
And you remember the boys coming home? What are your memories?
Oh, it was
of
wonderful. They came back with their army bags and army uniforms and stuff like that. Yeah, we were very patriotic. My family didn't like Mussolini at all. They made fun of him. I remember that as a kid. When he would puff up like a chicken, and they would imitate him and make fun of him. They didn't like Mussolini.
Was your family political?
No.
To the left at all?
No, but we were raised Democratic.
Okay.
I will say this, that my grandmother's brothers and sisters, my Uncle Phil and my Uncle Sam, were not Catholic. My grandmother was Catholic, and her sister was Catholic, but they were Christian Scientists.
Christian Scientists?
Yes, strange.
Yeah.
Strange for Italians. But what I found out is that on the my grandmother's my grandmother married, well, the great grandmother married a Mazzoni, okay, and a Mazzoni was a barber, but her father was a Pignatelli, who was apparently some sort of nobility out of Potenza, I think in Italy, and they were very active apparently in the reunification of Italy back around 1870, and they supported Garibaldi and Emanuele and Mazzoni and Cavour, and the church was against it, and I think because they were on that side, a Pignatelli was assassinated, and he was a pharmacist. We still have the mortar and the pedestal, that he ground all the pharmaceuticals together. But because he was apparently assassinated by the church, my uncles turned on the Catholic Church and they embraced Christian Scientism. And my cousin Philip Mazzoni is down in Southern Illinois at Principia, still working at the library there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Religion, the church that you went to, or when you were a kid?
St. Matthew's.
So that it wasn't heavily Italian?
Oh, sure, yeah.
St. Matthew's. That's a new one on me. Okay. So what about school?
Well, that later on, my father was Italian, my mother was Irish, and I had a terrible childhood. I was probably conceived out of wedlock, basically, because all I could find was a marriage certificate 1 month before I was born at St. Matthew's Church in September of 36. I was born in October 36. It referred to a civil marriage in Crown Point, Indiana, but I could never verify that, and I searched for it. And so my parents reunited around 1941-42, and then we moved out to Mayfield Avenue, 1531 North Mayfield, and I went to St. Angela's School, grammar school. in that neighborhood was mostly Italian and Polish. Italian and Irish, I say. Italian and Irish. And but every Sunday we would go to my grandmother's for dinner. And the first word I ever heard in Italian, I learned very quickly, was mangia, mangia. My grandma said, mangia, mangia, eat. And we eat. We had wonderful dinners. I didn't appreciate it when I was a kid. I do now. But she'd make wonderful meatballs and pasta and chicken bones and things like that. And I'd say, "Grandma, make me a hamburger." But eventually now I drive halfway across the city for a good Italian dinner.
So, what did your father do? Did I ask that?
My father was an asbestos covered pipes with asbestos. But in 1942, my mother's father, who was Irish, found him a job working on the dock at Patton Scaffolding. And he started working on the docks as a dock handler. And eventually, he was smart. He went right to the top of the company, became president of the Patton Scaffolding Company.
Oh, okay. So,
my father had blonde hair and blue eyes. Everybody called him the Swede. And the answer for that I found out going to Southern Italy. A lot of people down in Southern Italy have blue eyes and blonde hair and red hair. I hate to use the word, but it's probably the result of Crusader rape, okay?
Yeah.
Because the Normans came down, soldiers, blonde hair and blue eyes. As a matter of fact, in Gravina, where my grandmother's from, there's a big Norman fort. Well, not big, but it's a Norman fort on top of a hill overlooking Gravina. There's probably more forts in Puglia, Norman forts, than there are in Normandy. There's beautiful forts down there. They were built by the Normans 500 years ago.
As part of their movement toward the Middle East.
The Holy Land, yeah.
Were you privileged in your youth? Did you feel that way?
No, I didn't feel poor, but I wasn't privileged at all. No. And we had food, we had housing. So, what more do you need?
Okay. What about school? What was your experience?
Well, I went to St. Angela's Grammar School, and then I went to St. Mel's High School in the west side of Chicago. I tried to go to Fenwick, but they wouldn't take me at Fenwick, so I had to go to St. Mel's, which was a good school, Christian Brothers School. And about that time, my parents went through a bad divorce, a very nasty divorce, and I had a terrible childhood. My father wasn't a good father because he didn't have a father. His father was shot and killed, and he had a stepfather who didn't like him. So my father was never nurturing, never loving. And my father never really liked me until I started making money at the Board of Trade. Then he was my father. So when my father died, he owed me $140,000. I mean, just the opposite of the other way. But so I ended up, when my parents divorced, I ended up living at Mercy Boys' home at 1140 West Jackson Boulevard.
How old were you then?
About 17. I had no place to live.
So, I mean, just before your adulthood, you were in this boys' home.
I lived there 4 years, and I went to Loyola University from there, like where you were on the board of, yeah.
Okay, so how did you happen to decide to go to Loyola?
There was a woman in St. Angela's named Rosemary Deegan. She was a paraplegic. She would go to communion all the time, the last one, kind of struggling up to the aisle. And she knew me. She knew about my family's problem. And she worked at Loyola as a student counselor or something like that. And she knew about Mercy Boys. And Rosemary Deegan was the one who helped me at Loyola and helped me go to Mercy Boys home. So she died.
So you would have, what did you study at Loyola?
Economics and finance.
So
a minor in math.
That specific.
Yeah.
Were you one of those people who knew what they wanted to do with their life?
No. When I went to St. Mel's, there were 3 slots. You could go to a trade school, which was like woodworking and metalworking. That was one curriculum. Second one was business, bookkeeping and accounting, things like that. And the third was college. Well, I tested for college. So I studied chemistry, physics, algebra, geometry, things like that. And 2 years of Latin, which was good. So when I matriculated from St. Mel, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist,
Oh.
but I never came close to that.
Mm-hmm. Did were you and your family connected with the Italian community, with mutual benefit societies,
No.
patron saint clubs, that sort of
No,
thing?
they like Saint Rocco, but it was a family. What we they had a few friends, but it was just mostly just family. I would say that they probably had 2 or 3 friends, 4 friends out there. It was all about family and food and family.
Mm-hmm.
I had my Aunt Rose. She was married to a Jewish man named Joe Raff. My Aunt Esther was married to a Canadian whose family goes back to the Revolutionary times, and they were always pro-Tory. So when the Revolutionary War came out, the Wilson family moved up to Halifax, and he was working up in Halifax in the YMCA and was sent to Chicago as a missionary and worked in the Italian ghetto and met my aunt, and they married. They had a great marriage. So it was, and then my father and my mother, that marriage didn't work out at all. So it was all about family,
Mm-hmm.
and we would gather together and card table chairs around the big table, and my grandmother would bring the food. It was about family, and during the week sometimes we get together for family too.
Did anyone ever take you to a feast, to Mount Carmel feast in Melrose Park, or to Cicero and Roosevelt Road for an Italian festival in the summertime?
No, not that I can remember. No. It was all about the family,
Mm-hmm.
and I had my Aunt Lena, my Aunt Gilda, my Uncle Sam, my Uncle Phil. So our family probably, and they all had children. So I had cousins, a lot of them still around, and so we probably had maybe 30 people. So just interacting with them
Mm-hmm.
in those days, it was.
Were you proud to be Italian?
I did. I am now. When I was young, I didn't know. I didn't know what I was. I never once had a dinner in my Irish grandmother's house, and I was having dinner all the time at my Italian grandmother's house. As a matter of fact, no. When I was young, I wanted to be Irish because, and I thought it was more Irish because when we moved, it was probably more Irish than Italians. So out to St. Angela's Parish from
Mm-hmm.
St. Matthew's. However, when I was a kid, my Irish grandfather had a plumbing shop at 318 South Jefferson, and he had a brother named Tom Brown. They had a pretty successful plumbing shop, and I'd go down there to work as a kid. And one day I was working there, and a salesman came in from one of the plumbing supply shops house, and I'm sweeping the floor, and he said, "Who's the kid?" And my Uncle Tom said, "Oh, the kid's that's Parky's grandson, and the kid's half Dago." It hurt me. It hurts me to this day that he said that. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't good. So no, I felt some prejudice as Italian, although I passed as Irish, but I am Italian, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
proud to be Italian. Sono orgoglioso di essere italiano.
Mm-hmm.
I have even an Italian passport.
Oh, okay. Well, I remember that in the news.
Yeah. I have a U.S. passport
Both
too.
of them.
Yeah,
Okay. That's a good show and tell item.
Yeah.
So you're in college at Loyola, and did you live on campus?
No, I lived at Mercy Boys Home.
You were in Bridgeport.
I lived at
by
Mercy
this
Boys
time.
Home for about 4.5 to 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, when anybody mentions Bridgeport, they think of politics. Were you involved in Bridgeport politics at all?
No, I was never in Bridgeport till probably around 1990s, first time I went to Bridgeport.
But you were at Loyola. You were living in Bridgeport when you went to Loyola?
No,
Oh,
I never lived in Bridgeport. I lived at Mercy Boys Home at 1140 West Jackson, right down the street here.
And so you were living at the boys' home when you were going to Loyola?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And a little bit of high school, too.
Okay. And so what impact did Loyola have on you? Were you active in sports or club activities besides the academics?
Loyola and the Jesuits had a big impact upon me. I think they changed my life because they taught about the core subjects, of course, were the classics. We had to take classes in 5 classes in philosophy, which kind of inspired me. Of course, I took classes in business, accounting, and finance and economics and things like that. I had a minor in math. But they also promoted social justice and community service, 2 things that stayed with me my whole life. So at Loyola, I wasn't in athletics because Loyola then, now is a commuter school. There was no campus when I went there. There is now, somewhere up in Rogers Park. So I literally took the Jackson Boulevard bus down to State Street, took the subway, the red light up to Chicago Avenue. That's how I went to school. And it was a good time. At that time, where Mercy Boys Home is now, it was Skid Row. It was a mess over there, a terrible neighborhood. Junkyards, wine shops, winos everywhere. So we did go to Skinner Park once in a while and play baseball, but otherwise we stayed around the home. We had a nice gym there. The gym is still there. So at Loyola, what I did there is I tried to take advantage of everything I could. For example, I wasn't a very good speaker, so I joined the drama club. And I was not a good actor, but I could sing and play the guitar. So at first I was in a play. I wanted to get over stage fright, to be able to get in front of a crowd and perform. So I did do that, and I was in a play called Girl Crazy, a quartet. And we were good. I must say, I can't harmonize, I can sing, solo, and then they would harmonize around me. I had 3 other guys. So I did that. And then I wanted to write. So I joined the newspaper, and I wrote some articles for the newspaper. I wasn't very good at either one, but at least I did things to kind of improve my writing and also my ability to speak in front of people. Also, Loyola had a series of poetry readings back in the 1956, before you were born, and they brought in some great poets like Robert Frost, T.S. Eliot, Damita Stitwell, Gwendolyn Brooks, E.E. Cummings, and they had it at Lewis Towers. It was magical at night, and I was able to come from Mercy Boys Home to see that. And I heard them actually read their poetry. Of course, they all died in the 60s, but in the 50s they were alive. And I tried to avail myself of all the culture and all the information I could possibly absorb there.
No beat poets, huh?
Way before the beat poets.
Ferlinghetti, no Ferlinghetti?
No. These were real poets. I mean, they had a message, had rhymes, had a theme. Not that, nothing like that.
Did you ever read anything about Italian Americans, Italian immigrants, or were you impacted by any theatrical or film representation of Italians, or do you remember Life with Luigi?
I don't remember Life with Luigi. I do remember one thing impacted me. I was a young kid, and we're reading a history book. I read about the hanging of these Italians down in New Orleans, and they had pictures of them hanging from the lampposts.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when I say that to you now, I get a little chill, because even though I'm not full-blooded Italian and I don't look Italian, I am Italian, and I thought, gee, that could happen to me, and of course later I found out that they were Sicilians, Italians, and that they were accused of a murder which they didn't do, and the vigilantes hung them. wrongfully. I remember that vividly because I remember.
That was in college, or
No, that was like either in grammar school or high school.
oh,
Yeah,
oh.
that affected me too, because I knew I was Italian because my grandmother couldn't speak English hardly, and I love my grandmother. My grandmother loved me too.
Did you have any skill in Italian?
No, no.
Could you understand anything?
You could understand.
Mangia.
You know, she talked with her hands. I knew what manja meant, you know, and subito. I knew what that meant, you know, quickly. Uh, I didn't learn Italian until 1990.
How did you learn it? Did you study?
Well, I went to. I was in Florence with a lady friend, and I overheard some Americans talking, and I said, "What are you doing here?" They said, "Studying Italian." So I found out the school. When I came back, I'd run for chairman in 1990, and I had lost the election, and I made a list of all the things I wanted to do, and one was to learn Italian. So I went to Florence to a school called the School of Stranieri, for the strangers,
Yeah.
and I had a choice to live with a dormitory, a pensione, a hotel, or an Italian family. I selected the Italian family, who I didn't know at all. So I arrived there with two bags, like an immigrant reverse, in Carigi, which is the hospital district of Florence, and I had to walk up 3 flights of stairs. And I arrived there, and they had a daughter who spoke English. I didn't speak much Italian then. And so they showed me my room. My room was probably maybe 10 by 12. It was very small. I had a cot, I had a desk, a credenza. That was sufficient. So they showed me around, and it was, I would say, the whole apartment there. It was nice and clean and neat. It may have been 1,000 square feet at the most, you know, and there were like 2 bedrooms. I slept on the front porch, kind of, and 1 bathroom. And I said to the daughter who translated Italian to her parents, Luigi and Martha, they've since died. I said, we have a problem here. I said, what's that? I said, here there's 4 people, 1 bathroom. I said, in my apartment in Chicago at Water Tower, I have 4 bathrooms, 1 person. And Luigi said, why? I said, I couldn't answer him. I don't know why I have a bathroom. I only use 1. So, yeah, so that's.
So you weren't a poor student at that time?
Oh, no, I could have stayed anywhere. No, I wasn't a poor student, no. But, so, and Martha was wonderful, and the Italian dialect of Florence or Siena is beautiful. It's not like we're from Bari, there's about 90 dialects, maybe even more in Italy, but their Italian is so beautiful. When she spoke, I could understand her. It was so beautiful. She like sang, it was like lyrical, like musical. So I studied there 1 month. I had 4 hours of grammar in the morning and 2 hours of conversation in the afternoon. And one night I'd go to cooking school, and then on weekends I'd study art. I was only there a month. And I would take the bus, the Quarta Dici bus, the 14 bus from their house down to the center. And that was tough.
You still remember that?
Well, they would say scendere, you know, get off the bus, you know, people are pushing and stuff like that. But that's how you learn Italian.
Okay, yeah. Let's get back to the chronology. Left you at Loyola. What happened when you graduated? You graduated in what year?
1958.
1958, okay. That's the year that I started college. Okay.
Well, you're a youngster. Giovani. Say Giovani.
Okay. So, 1950s, new graduate in business and what?
Well, I started Loyola in 1954. I graduated St. Mel's in 1954. I started Loyola. I graduated in 1958. And so my first job, I was a teacher. I taught high school for 2 years.
Oh, yeah. Where at?
I did my student teaching at Crane Tech, at Damon and Oakley and Jackson, because I was still living at Mercy Boys Home then.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easy to go from Jackson and Racine down to Jackson and Oakley, just a bus ride. I could walk half the time down there. So I did that for 2 years. I did my student teaching at Crane Tech, and there were a big group of Jewish teachers there. And Crane Tech was all black at the time, a dangerous school. So the Jewish teachers all moved up to Sullivan and Rogers Park, pardon me, which I thought was an Irish school, but all Jewish. So I followed them because I loved the Jews. We had a very good relationship. My student advisor was Bill Glickman. He since passed. And Dave Schaffler. So I followed him up to Sullivan High School. And I taught at Sullivan High School for 2 years. I taught algebra, freshman algebra, sophomore geometry, and economics to seniors for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, there must have been quite a change going to a school with Jewish students. The stereotype is that they're all really motivated and pretty bright.
They were. And I've been with the Jews ever since. Ever since then, I've always had Jewish partners in business. The Jewish people are wonderful people. Truly, I think the chosen people. And they are smart, and they are driven and motivated. In that school, we had more National Merit Scholarship winners than any other school in Chicago at that time.
And Sullivan in the early 60s.
Well, yeah, 1960.
1960,
yeah. 95% Jewish.
So now, how did you feel? Your father was a successful businessman, and
Yeah, but
your mother, but you were living in the boys' home.
I had a terrible childhood. My mother and father divorced, a nasty divorce, and I'm not going to tell you all the horror stories, but it was bad. My mother became an abject alcoholic. My father was gone. He was not a good father. And my mother drank heavily. And I suffered a lot. I'm not complaining. I survived. But I read books by Ralph Waldo Emerson, Self-Reliance, Walden's Pond by Henry David Thoreau, and some of the Roman Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, and things like that. And I embraced Stoicism and strength to overcome and endure the pain I had with my parents. So I just had to adapt and endure, and I did the best I could. So I lived at Mercy Boys Home, and and so I was still teaching at Crane Tech. My father never made a lot of money. He wasn't rich by any means. I mean, I had lent him money over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I told you when he died,
Yeah.
he owed me $140,000. My father never really liked me until I came to the Board of Trade next door and started making some money. Then I was his son.
Okay. Now, we have you as a high school teacher at Sullivan in the early 60s. What happened then?
Well, then I decided to go into business. So I answered a blind ad in the newspaper looking for a manager of new business development at a bank. I had no idea where it was. I applied for it, and I was hired by a man named Bernie Feinberg at the Jefferson State Bank, which was at 5301 West Lawrence Avenue. Bernie Feinberg, probably the smartest man in business I ever met. He built with Tyner, with Rubenstein, the Sears Tower, whether he had the land for the Sears Tower, things like that. I worked at the bank for about 2 years, and Bernie and I became very good friends. He was about 10 years older than me. He liked me. Every Friday night they would have Shabbat, which is a Jewish get-together on Friday night, and all his Jewish friends would come, and we'd have tuna fish and potato salad and gefilte fish and all that stuff. And they would sit around and talk about business, and it was wonderful. They were so bright and so vibrant and so robust. So I met a few people like that, and I enjoyed that very much. And I made some money with Bernie there. At the same time, well, we'll talk about Harvard High School. I was the mayor a little bit later, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
So I worked there for 2 years, and then I was going down to LaSalle Street a lot, delivering papers and picking up stock securities and stuff like that. And in those days, there was no electronic transmission; it was all done manually. And I was kind of like a delivery boy too, running down here to these banks with checks to pick up certificates, to come back to the bank for collateral, things like that. And I liked LaSalle Street. And I said, someday I want to be down there. So around 19, so I taught high school from 58 to 60. From 60 to 62, I went to bank. And in 62, I answered another blind ad newspaper to work for a company down on LaSalle Street. I had no idea what the company was. So it turned out I was hired again by a company called Ullman Grain, a Jewish company again, run by German Jews who came over before, the Russian and Polish and Jews, stuff like that. They were a little higher class, I guess. Wonderful family. And I worked for them right next door at the Board of Trade building for about 2 or 3 years at 141 West Jackson. And I worked my way up. I was a full broker. They gave me people to service and handle. I can tell you stories about that. And I was so dumb, I had no idea there was a trading floor on the 4th floor. But I remember a kid I went to St. Mel's with, Billy Sullivan, had told me he was going to go work there. So one day at my lunch hour, I went down, and in those days the balcony was open. I looked to the right, and Billy was down there. In those days, the Board of Trade was very quiet, very slow. And I waved to him, and he said, come down. So in those days, security was very, very weak. You didn't need security because it was a different world then. Didn't have all these terrorists running around like we have today. So I went to the floor every day for my lunch period, and I would talk to the Cashman family, who were all Irish, mostly policemen. But I knew Billy from high school. And they liked me. They were good with me, too. So after about 2 or 3 years of that, I decided to go into business for myself. Now, Bernie Feinberg, who I'd worked for, and I'm still friends with, he started out with currency exchanges. He had a currency exchange at Rockwell and Division. That was his first one, and he built it up into a chain, and then eventually bought a bank, started a bank. I thought, well, I'll go into the currency exchange business, because I always thought it's better to emulate than innovate. Better to copy somebody who's successful than try to do something yourself. I mean, if somebody's doing well in the currency exchange business, there must be money there, so I should do that. Or I could buy a seat in the Board of Trade. Well, the currency exchange was $15,000 when I was going to buy it, Laramie and Chicago Avenue, the west side where I was from. Or a Board of Trade seat was $11,500. It was cheaper. So I bought the Board of Trade seat.
No. You could have gone into business with Tony Fornelli.
I knew Tony very well, yeah. You know, his Sam Galeota died. Did you know that?
Who's?
His son-in-law died.
Oh.
Sam Galeota, married to his daughter Angela.
Oh.
He died last September, 57 years old.
I didn't realize that. I mean, the family isn't around the Casa Italia anymore. So.
Well, Sam Galeota was his son-in-law, and he rehabbed the Pittsfield building at 55 East Washington. He had named Fornelli Hall.
Yeah, I remember.
But it's all gone now. He had big trouble over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know Dr. Nuzzo.
No.
He just died yesterday. The wake is this week. He's a famous Italian podiatrist who was partners with my son-in-law. He just died. Terrible thing.
Okay. So we have you on the Board of Trade. This is the late 60s, early 70s. Where are we?
Well, I joined the Board of Trade in 65.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some success and some failures. So I had to sell my seat in 1968. I sold it for $17,000, but I owed the clearing from $14,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in trouble. But I sold it and paid my clearing member off. And then I tried to find work, and that was very difficult. First job I had was at J.C. Penney at Gulf Mill selling furniture. And I had no idea about furniture. The lady would say, what kind of wood is this? I said, ma'am, that's genuine tree wood. I didn't know spruce from elm, okay? But my father, as bad as he was a because Patton Scaffolding used iron workers, he found me a job as an iron worker. There's two types of iron workers: structural, they're up high, and rod busters, who are also up high at times. Sometimes they're putting in foundations, and we tie all the rebar, the reinforcement rods together. So that was a pretty good job. Tough job, but good money.
So this is, your career didn't go straight
No.
upward in the was it late 60s. You were an iron worker. How long did that last?
About a year. And so in the summer of 1970, we were putting on the top two floors at the telephone building over at Federal and Harrison, right across this Eisenhower Expressway. And I'm up on top of this roof in the summertime, bending over, tying all these reinforcement rods together. And I could see Ceres on top of the Board of Trade building. And I said, let me go back there. I'll be a good boy. I'll behave myself. And the memberships went from 31,000, where they got down to 17, where I sold mine. And I called up my friends, and they said, I want to come back. And they said, come back. I said, okay. So in those days, it took 2 months to be approved to buy membership. But I saw the memberships traded at 17,000. I thought, well, I could buy it back when I sold it for. I didn't have all the money. And so I made application. And by the time 2 months passed, in August, to buy the seat back, they got back up to $31,000. Now, Bernie Feinberger lent me $20,000. I was $11,000 short. I went to see my clearing firm again, Mr. Shatkin, who now is my partner. And I said, Mr. Shatkin, Jewish, by the way, wonderful guy. I said, I guess I'm not able to come back. I have $20,000, but I'm short $11,000 because it was $31,000. He gave me a look, kind of a terrible look, and he pulled out a checkbook and wrote me a check for $11,000, and that's how I came back to the Board of Trade.
That was what year?
August of 1970.
Okay.
And I paid him back in a week and a half.
As a result of smart trades.
In the pit, I had a good trade in the corn pit, and I made $14,000, and I paid him $11,500. And I said to him, how can I ever pay you back? And he said, you can't. He says, just do unto others as I've done unto you. So I've always tried to help people.
Okay. And how did you feel about the line of work that you were in, considering all the philosophy that you had read? You'd been a teacher.
Well, I loved it because it's a adrenaline rush. It's all men. It's very competitive. It's an arena where you go down on the floor every day with a card and a pencil, and you have to match your wits against everyone else. So I love the competition. I love the camaraderie. I love the humor, the networking. It was wonderful.
So it was like a game.
It was like a game.
A sport.
It was like a sport, exactly. It was like a big locker room down there. We were doing real things, and we were providing two things: price discovery and risk management, hedging.
Okay, so we got you to 1970.
Well, let's go back to Harwood Heights. I was mayor.
Oh, when did you move to Harwood Heights?
Well, when I was married, I moved to Harwood Heights back in 1959.
Okay. And, okay, tell me about it.
Well, I bought a house there for $15,200, and I thought I bought a house in Chicago. I was so dumb. So I got my first water bill, and that was very high. So we lived there at 4310 North Newcastle, and then I was teaching at Sullivan, so I would commute there every day. I'd drive up to Rogers Park. Traffic wasn't bad in those days. You could drive everywhere. And so around 1961, there was Harwood Heights was mostly Italian and Polish. because when they when they redid the UIC, University of Illinois campus,
Yeah.
and tore down the Italian houses in the neighborhoods, a lot of Italians moved out to Harwood Heights. They had to move somewhere, so they moved there. Harwood Heights was surrounded by Chicago. So 1961, there was I became involved in the Democratic organization then because I had all this stuff from Loyola about community service and with John F. Kennedy, inspiring young people like me and my wife, Mary Ann, who was Irish, by the way. So I was wanted to do good. I always wanted to do good and help people. So I thought I'd go into politics and in government and do something like Kennedy said those remarkable words when he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but rather what you can do for your country." Those words still resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, and Kennedy, a lot of young people then were imbued with politics. And of course, growing up in Chicago, we were all Democrats. So I naturally joined the Democratic Party, helped the precinct captain. And they noticed me, and they had me run for village clerk of Harwood Heights. So I said, okay, I'll do that. I was probably the first college graduate ever ran for office there.
Oh,
So man running for mayor was a man named Joe Zizzo.
Joe?
Zizzo, Z-I-Z-Z-O.
Okay.
It was all Italian. I mean, it was mostly Italian people in our group. So I ran as Joe Zizzo's clerk. He ran as mayor.
And you were Democrats?
Democrats the first time, yeah. And Joe was a good guy, real big guy. He looked menacing, but he wasn't. He was kind of a pussycat, but he was a real big man. He had a beer truck route. His father had worked for Al Capone. His father was a little guy.
Mm-hmm.
Mother was Big Rose. I remember his mother's name was Rose. She was big. And they all lived in Harwood Heights, everybody. And so we had a big group: Rocco Olita, Joe Pascola, Leo Gonzalez, Leo Sanchez, Jimmy Cazzone. Wonderful guys. Okay.
So you were elected the first time
As village clerk,
as village clerk in what year?
1961.
61.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did that go?
It went well, but Harwood Heights was a rough town. Harwood Heights, we had taverns that went 24/7. They never closed. Like Cicero, we had gambling. The mafia was involved. The syndicate was involved. They were so powerful that when we annexed the eastern part of Harwood Heights, there were two lots left out, one at Gunnison and Lawrence, and one at Montrose. I'm sorry. One at Lawrence and Nagle, and one at Montrose and Nagle. At Lawrence and Nagle, it was the Wagon Wheel, which is a bookmaking. It was a bookmaking operation.
Mm-hmm.
So when we annexed it, the map was laid out, and the little lot there was black. Down in Montrose was the Mist, the notorious roadhouse where they had body shows, and that was black. Because they wanted to be policed by the Cook County Police. They had a Sheriff Babb at that time.
Mm-hmm.
He had all the attributes the outfit wanted. He could find a dice game in a phone booth. That's exactly what they wanted. So that's how powerful they were then.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe, I wouldn't say they were involved, but we knew all those guys. And at that time, the outfit was run from Rosemont, a guy named Rocky the Parrot-Nosed Potenza, and he would come every time we had a meeting. We'd go out there afterwards. I was just a young guy, and then they would do their business. Joe and the rest of the guys. This guy named Omar Mariota, he was there too, and so apparently Rocco was a nice guy. He took care of all the gambling, and it kept the taverns going. But the people, after 4 years, as the neighborhood started gentrifying and young people were coming in, they didn't want the all-night taverns. They didn't want the gambling. They didn't want the zoning code violations. So people were up in arms against Joe. And Joe got involved with a Polish builder, and then they did something with Joe Pascola. They were moving a tavern from Foster Avenue over to Lawrence Avenue, and And Joe Pascoe didn't want it. And Joe had a job at a brewery, and there were 12 or 13 taverns in Howard Heights, and they were a big purchase of beer from this brewery.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe happened to work there. So they went and said to his boss, Joe brought a protest to the village hall. He said, I don't want Enrights to move near my kids because they're going to school and these drunks will be coming out early in the morning. So they tried to put pressure on him to back off on the protest,
Mm-hmm.
and they threatened to fire him. And Joe came to me and some others and complained about it. I said, that's it. I'm done with Joe. So I went to see Joe. I said, Joe, we're like brothers. I said, but what you did to Pascoe is not right. I said, I'm going to run against you. I'm not going to win, but you'll know you've been in a fight. Now, I was a Loyola grad. I could speak. I was young. I've had some osteoarthritis necrosis, so my speaking is a little slurred right now. I was a much better speaker then.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I have the goods on you, and I could, if we have a debate, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
chop you to pieces.
So this would have been in
1965.
Okay.
So Joe wisely didn't run. He went in the real estate business.
Oh, so you didn't have to.
Well, they put up a surrogate, a guy named Milton Hirsch, and they ran as a Democratic Party. I ran as an independent Reform Party, and I won the election.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now being mayor of Harwood Heights, is that a full-time job?
No. I was mayor of Howard Heights. I was chairman of the zoning board, chairman of the liquor commission, and my pay was $200 a month. Part-time. It was all part-time.
Okay.
I think it still is part-time.
Okay, and so were you in office when the Harlem Irving Plaza came?
That was before, a little before us, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think it was there. Yeah. See, Norwich had that. Norwich is right next to it, so that was a big earner. So we tried to emulate them by putting as much retail on Harlem Avenue we could for the sales tax. But we never had a big shopping center like Norwich had. That was big sales tax, revenue, and property tax too.
So how long did you serve as mayor?
3 years, and I resigned. I could have went. Well, I had some issues with some guys. I wanted to quit politics. So I said I could just stay in politics and be rich, so a good chance of going to jail. But if I stayed in politics and be honest, I'd be poor. So I didn't want it. They wanted me to run for the state house. I said no.
Okay.
I could have gone on.
So that was sort of on the side in the 60s.
Exactly.
But you had a job
The Board of Trade.
at the Board of Trade at the time. Okay. We jumped to 1970s. What was going on in your life then?
Well, I was divorced then. When I lost my money at the Board of Trade, I was kind of depressed, so my wife and I divorced. I was single, and those were glorious years for the Board of Trade because that was in '73 with the Russian grain purchases, and that soybeans went from $3 to $12 a bushel, so it was like shooting ducks in a barrel to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all made a lot of money, and could have been better. Okay.
Okay.
Well, the business was good. A lot of volatility, a lot of business, that sort of thing. It was good. Yeah.
Then, so the 70s were good years, and you moved on. How did you, or when did you become the chairman or the president?
Well, that took a long period. I wasn't chairman until I was elected in 1992, and I served from 1993 to 1998, 6 years, the longest serving chairman in the history of the Board of Trade. I ran in 1990 and I lost by a few votes to Billy O'Connor. That's when I went to Italy and studied Italian.
Billy O'Connor is the guy who has had a foundation in his honor that they always mention on WTTW.
O'Connor Foundation, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, he and his brother Eddie, good guy. He died, heavy drinker.
Yeah.
So it took a long time because I went through the committee system, and you really have to do some work to become chairman of the Board of Trade by going through working on different committees and gradually working your way up to the Board of Directors. And I did that. A lot of work in the afternoon on like the floor committee and the membership committee and the finance committee, things like that. So I was a lot of committees. I was first elected to the Board of Directors in I think about 1980s. I was elected vice chairman twice in the late 1980s. I ran against Billy, who beat me by a few votes. And I was depressed for about 24 hours. Then I made a list of all the things I wanted to do. I wanted to study Italian. I did that. I wanted to climb a few mountains, which I'm a mountain climber. I did that.
Really?
And then he only served one term, and I ran in 1992, and he supported me. He endorsed me. He liked me, and I had three successive.
So was there any ethnicity involved in the politics of the Board of Trade, or was it just money?
Yeah. There was a lot of. You grew up in Chicago. We're very ethnic. I mean, the Irish, the Poles, the Germans, the Italians. Yeah, there was a lot of ethnicity. But I passed. I passed for a WASP. Everybody thought I was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Nobody knew I was Italian.
And you didn't stress your Italian background?
Oh, of course I did. Yes, I did. As much as I could. But my last name doesn't end in a vowel anymore, and I don't look Italian. I guess I don't act Italian, whatever that is. I mean, I was, but I'm absolutely proud to be Italian. My Italian grandmother was the only one who ever loved me unconditionally. I could rob a bank or whatever. You're a good boy.
What did you accomplish? What are your proudest accomplishments as chairman of the Board of Trade?
Well, I think I accomplished quite a bit. I'm not saying that I was a great chairman. I was a good chairman. I had a great legacy of previous chairmen who brought in new products, expanded the membership. People like Les Rosenthal, people like Ronnie Young, like Bill Mallers, people like that. Richard Sandor, who brought in financial futures, which is now 80% of our business. Before that was all grain. That was not me. That was Richard Sandor, people like Les Rosenthal, bright guys, okay. I don't know how bright I am, but I certainly supported them and liked them all. And so I actually inherited their legacy for great brightness, and I executed pretty well. I guess my legacy would be probably the championship of the building of the new trading floor over on next door to the Board of Trade building, the annex we call it, a 60,000 square foot trading floor large enough to house a 747. Some people call it derisively the Arboretum. But when I assumed the chair, Billy O'Connor tried to have it passed by the membership. He lost 2-1. When I brought it to membership, I had passed 2-1 in favor of it. Okay, just by my elocution and my orations, I guess. And but it was easy because the floors were crowded. It was like a big souk, a big market. You could hardly move. It was just masses of people, and we needed more space at that time. Now remember, this was like 1992. There was no internet. There was no technology. A little bit was creeping in. So I ran that platform to build a building. It was a big deal. We had to tear a whole block, half a block down, 327 South LaSalle, vacate LaSalle Street. We can walk over there. I can show it to you if you want, if you have time.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
Well, I think I went to the old one. We visited the old one on a tour once, but I don't think I've seen the new one.
Well, we can walk over the building, and if you have time. And so that cost $160 million. It's a big deal. So that's probably my big legacy. Mike O'Connell, he derisively called it the Arboretum. But midway through the building cycle, I went over to see Bill Brodsky at the CBOE, and he watched this, and he started buying stocks on his computer. I said, "What's going on here? What is this stuff?" Then I started using internet, email, stuff like that. And I guess it turned out to be somewhat of a mistake, because that trading floor is going to be the last trading floor ever built. You don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Technology's changed the world. So if I go there, it's like a ghost town, like a cemetery. There's a few people back in the floor, but everything's done electronically upstairs now. And it's a terrible thing, because a lot of people have, like my son and many others, have not been able to adapt because they don't have a skill set. They all know about open outcry. Open outcry is gone. It's not left, so what can you do? So, but I saw it coming at the end, and I went to Frankfurt and merged with the Eurex exchange. So we did adapt to electronic trading. But a lot of members didn't like that, because they were open outcry guys forever. 150 years we were the world's largest futures exchange, from 1848 to 1998, all open outcry. And when I would introduce technology on the floor, like electronic transmission to the board, is still in the open outcry pit, some of these traders were like Luddites. They would take pencils and jam the order machine, stuff like that. Yeah, it was tough.
Okay.
But I survived. I had a lot of support, and the Board of Trade was like a mecca, and people would come from all over the world to study and train with us. And a number of Italians came. Like Fruzi was a big Italian company. They would send people, of course, became big trouble. But when I was chairman, I had a standing order. I said, any Italian that comes to work on the floor, you bring them to see me. Okay? So I met about 5 or 6 people that I'm still friends with. They're back in Italy now, or somewhere around the world.
So what about Italian American presence in this on the board, or members of the board?
Oh, we had Italian members, yeah. We had some Italian members, and one time I walked in the lobby over there, and I was talking to Jay Macatelli and Mike Lazzaroni, and this Irish guy came by. I never liked him. He saw me. He said, "How all the Dagos doing this morning?" like that. And they let him go. I went up to see him after. I said, that was nice what you said. I said, that's I would like me to call you a Mick or something like that. It's not right. Why do things like that? It didn't resonate with him.
Okay, so to finish the chronology, after you left as chair, what course did your career take?
Well, I had several banks. I was chairman of the board of several banks, and I was in banking for quite a while after that. A bank in Hinsdale, we sold that, and a bank at Randolph Street. That was a big one. I lost a lot of money in that one. And I was on this bank board too over in Ukraine. I had some money. I lost some money over there too.
Okay. Presidential politics. You get involved in that at all?
Well, Tuesday night, a friend of mine had a party for me, Blair Hull, and Carol Moseley Braun was there, former senator. I supported her. I was never involved in any presidential campaigns except, fundraising, that sort of thing with Clinton. I'm a Democrat, so I didn't support the Bushes. I don't like Trump. I'm not a big Trump supporter. No, I like to read about politics and understand politics pretty well. I have no aspirations.
What about Loyola and
I was in
charities?
My 2 charities are Mercy Boys Home, where I live, and Loyola. I was a major contributor to both of them. Okay, I served on the board of Mercy Boys Home for many, many years, and I'm probably one of the longest-serving members of the board of directors, board of trustees at Loyola. I'm still on the Rome board. I'm
On the Rome board.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Loyola has 5 campuses. Water Tower,
Yeah.
Lakeshore, Maywood, Beijing, China, and
Vietnam.
Rome, Monte Mario, Rome. Have you been there?
Yes. Yeah. Once, twice actually.
So Monday night, I was at a advisory committee for the Rome board up in North Commonwealth Avenue, and the new director, Dr. Andrews. Have you met him?
No.
He came in. He's a friend of mine now. He replaced Father Garanzini. You remember Garanzini, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to Rome, and Garanzini is going to be there, so I'll be with Garanzini in Rome.
Give him my regards.
I will, yeah. And have you met Father Del Bove?
No.
Oh, he's another good Jesuit. He'll be there too. And I'll go up to Monte Mario and spend some time up there. We're building a new residence hall up there.
Oh.
Yeah, I can show you pictures of it if you want. So,
Yeah.
we're doing that too. So I'm still involved there. Those are my 2 charities, Mercy Boys and another one. And I'm also involved in Our Lady of Pompeii, where I saw you, for Dominic's
Yeah.
Father Fragamini. I'm supposed to have lunch with Father Fragamini, so.
Yeah, he's probably the best speaker
Is he
of
good?
Italian
Yeah.
in the Italian American community, or maybe in the whole community of Chicago.
Yes, he's a marvelous speaker. He is a great speaker.
Well, we all know about the problems you've had lately. They've been all over the newspapers, but what about the future? What are your do you have any irons in the fire? What's next?
The problems I had all over. I had a terrible time. You want me to talk about it or not?
Summary.
Yeah. Well, I had it's tough, but anyway, I had a malfattore, wrongdoer, ex-wife, and I ended up 9 months in incarceration at the jail. Cook County was not nice, nasty, but because of the beneficence and generosity of 5 angels, they kind of paid her off, not what she wanted, and I was liberated on Valentine's Day. I was supposed to be liberated on the 13th, but she wouldn't let me out because the money was in a bank that wasn't closed on a Wednesday, so ironically, I had to wait till February 14th before I was liberated. And I had a party Tuesday night to celebrate this. All my friends were there.
Mm-hmm.
I had about 35 people. Some people couldn't make it. Mike Sneed was going to come, but she was sick. People like that.
Oh.
So my future is that I'm going back to Italy. I've got some family there. I've got some business stuff going on over there. And I've got a project out in Rockford that's tied to Italy too. I'm going to work on that. I've got a company next door, Arbor, which we make a little money. It's not much at all anymore. But I'm 82.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on my 83rd orbit of the sun, so where am I going? I want to enjoy life. And, I like Italy a lot. I do. I like living there.
And you mentioned you'd be going to a lot of different places in Italy. You obviously have friends, or there's some attraction in each place, huh?
I actually lived in Lugano, Switzerland, since 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I gave that place up, but it's going to be open again in July. I may take that back, but I have so many friends over there that I can stay with. And my landlord, I'm great friends, he just bought a big villa in Pietro Sancho, which is adjacent to Forte di Marmi on the Ligurian coast there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very good friends with him and his family. He's got a room for me there. He says he wants me to come, bring whoever I want. So, and I've got a friend I'll take a cruise with over there. I'm working on that today. That'll be maybe a week. We'll go out of Venice, I think, on that. And I go up to Trento. I've got some good friends up there where they have a business up there called Exlam Dolomiti. And they're building the residence hall in Rome for Loyola. I introduced them. And I've got another project for them in Bellagio. A friend of mine wants to build a hotel up there. I'm working on that. And in Bologna, we got the Macafrario family. They're friends of mine. They may be interested in this company out Rockford that I know about.
Sounds like you have a full plate.
Well, I am, but I want to enjoy life too.
Yeah. What about the persistence of ethnicity in your family? Your children?
No, not so much. No, it's my wife was Irish, so my children are 3/4 Irish and 1/4 Italian. Now, my daughter, even though my wife was Irish, she learned to cook Italian. My daughter's married to an Italian, so she's a pretty good Italian cook, but they're more Irish than Italian.
Mm-hmm.
My son has an Italian passport, though, because of me, and I think my daughter's going to do it, too. She could have an Irish passport because her grandfather was born in Ireland. My grandfather was born in Ireland, too, but I chose the Italian passport because of my grandmother. No, it's vanishing. It's diminishing.
Yeah. I guess that anticipates the next question. Where is Italian ethnicity going? What kind of future do we face? What positives or negatives are on the horizon as far as a continuation of identity?
It's going to be tough because I'm second generation. My grandparents came from there. Now it's third and fourth generations. I think you lose it after a while. I hate to say it. The world is homogenizing too. It's not. We're becoming the same. You go to Italy now. There's McDonald's. However, when I made my speech in Italy in 1991, well, you saw me talking before the crowd. My friend Girandi was from Baltimore. He was sitting there in case I had any trouble with the dialect. And I said, my friend Girandi chiedemi quale città piace more, Baltimore or Gravina? I said, Gravina. The crowd said, perché? They applauded. I said, perché abbiamo avuto il Papa, we had a Pope 400 years ago.
Oh.
I said, but seconda is Gravina, Essenza, and McDonald's. There was a McDonald's in Altamora, but not in Gravina. However, when I went back for the unveiling of the clock, coincidentally, the headlines of the paper, Il Pani, the Altamora, ha vinto McDonald's. The Focaccia, they opened up a Focaccia store right next to the McDonald's.
Oh.
There were 5 McDonald's that closed in the south of Italy.
Oh.
But that's unusual. So wherever you go in the world, you see Americanization, and so I think it's going to vanish. I think our Italian heritage is going to vanish. It's terrible. Now, Greeks, I stay with a Greek family out in Barrington and my daughter, and they have it too, but that's vanishing too, the Greek culture. I had to go learn Italian. My Italian is abbastanza, it's just okay. Some people think it's a dying language.
The language?
It could be a dying language, Italian. I don't know. Everybody over there speaks English, just about now. And so English is becoming the lingua franca, the language of the world. So I guess the answer to your question, I'm afraid another couple of generations it's going
to
finish.
Well, I can't resist asking you for a comment on our work to try and preserve the history and culture of Italians in the United States, the immigration process, and the history of Italian Americans.
Well, I think it's something that's wonderful and should be done because we have much to be proud of, and not only much to be proud of, but we have much to change because we must change the stereotype view of Italians being mobsters and things like that. So I think it's very important to talk about the great contributions Italians have made to the world, like Marconi, like Enrico Fermi, people like that, and of course in the great Renaissance, Michelangelo and Donatello and Brunelleschi and all the things that they've done, and Dante Alighieri and Machiavelli, the great contributions that have been made. So the problem is, as far as ethnicity is concerned, the farther we move ourselves from the immigration time, I think it's going to become more Americanized, and I think it's going to be tougher to do it. It's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, it will preserve it, because if you take a look at, say, the people that came over, from, like, say, Norway and Sweden up in the north, they came over back in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
There's no cultural ethnicity preservation there to speak of. A little bit, but not much.
Yeah.
So little by little, I think you see the Italian feast diminishing too, right? There aren't as many as before.
No, but they have some staying power in that they serve a religious purpose, they serve an economic purpose, and they also are an outlet for people wanting to express their ethnicity. So it's there, and so I also think that the clubs are there because they give validation to individuals. You're the president of your little Italian club. You get some prestige, some respect from that. And I think there'll always be that aspect of it. Plus, I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but
However, I remember as a kid living at Mercy Boys Home. You go on Taylor Street, there were always these SAC, social athletic clubs in every corner.
Yeah.
They're all gone now.
Yeah.
So you have the Old Neighbor Italian American Club in Bridgeport and Shields. I was a member there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Is Santa Maria della Rota, they still have a feast?
I don't know. I think it's mostly a Mexican parish now.
Well, they moved. They did it one year in Harwood Heights when Joe Zissou was married. We had him.
That's Laura. Oh, you said Loretana. I heard Adolorata. Okay.
Yeah, wasn't that Santa Maria della Rota over on Oak and Larrabee Street?
No, it was Santa Maria.
Oh,
Santissima Maria Lauretana.
yeah. Do they still have that?
Yes, they do, and it's as big as ever, maybe
Where,
even
Bellows
bigger.
Park?
No, it moved to Niles.
They carry the statue again?
Yeah, and they have the angels flying, and there's a feast about every other weekend, a sizable feast, and Ron Onesti has commercialized it, and he does 2 or 3 around the Chicago area himself, and the Taylor Street people do something always.
But now the Sports Hall Museum from 1431 was Taylor. That's moved out somewhere. I don't know, with George Randazzo.
Yeah, well, it's moved to
Clybourne Avenue?
Rosemont.
Yeah.
In the hope that that entertainment district can be a better draw than Taylor Street.
But you see, Dominic DeFrisco's gone, Oscar D'Angelo's gone. It's Lou Rego's still around. I got to give him a call, but it's It's
Any last note that you'd like to, something that I haven't asked you about that you'd like the world to know?
uh, no, I think you're doing a good job. Keep it up, and I'll come out to Casa Italia someday and have lunch or something out there. Do they serve lunch out there?
Not exactly. The best we could do is a nice coffee break.
No, better than that. We'll go for lunch. Uh, my son's good friend, Tony Lazaro, bought and opened up the Taverna in Melrose Park on Division Street.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
we'll go there for lunch.
There's something there in the middle of May, the 25th to the 22nd of May. That's run by Frank DiPiero, one of the people who helped raise money for the Loyola Italian American Studies project. And
It's going to be there at Taverna?
It'll be at Taverna.
What is it? Oh,
The group? It's not. It's really his friends, Frank DiPiero's friends.
from Loyola.
He gets 30, 40 people to come every couple months, and they usually pass the hat for some charity or for Italy Day, or Frank is now the chair of Italy Day, so and he helped quite a bit with the raising money for Loyola on Loyola Italian American Studies.
I didn't know that.
Okay, well, okay, thanks very much. A fascinating interview. I think you'll find it useful in doing the book.